On day 19, the old iron bridge between them burned, and 40 armed neighbors faced 40 armed neighbors across the smoke. This story is not about day 19. It is about the 18 days that made it inevitable. And it is about the one man in the valley who saw it coming, belonged to nobody, and got his neighbors through it alive. Because when a society cracks, the loudest question is, which side are you on? The survivors are usually the people who refuse to answer. The crack, when it came, was boring. A bank freeze on a Tuesday, fuel rationing by Friday, the National Guard on the interstate by the end of the month, and a county suddenly 80 miles from everything on its own. Dale had lived in the valley for 30 years. He welded trailers, fixed pumps, kept the school furnace alive. Everyone owed him a favor. He made sure of that quietly on purpose. The valley held 2 new settlements that year, planted long before the crack. Up on the ridge, the compound, gun range, watchtower, flag nobody recognized. Down by the river, the farm collective, greenhouses, shared kitchens, meetings that never ended. The ridge people had moved out of the cities to wait for a collapse they were certain was coming. The river people had moved out of the same cities to build the world that would come after. Both were sure history was about to prove them right. Here is the first thing nobody wants to hear. In the beginning, both camps were good neighbors. The compound pulled stranded drivers out of the snow. The collective gave away tomatoes nobody asked for. The second thing nobody wants to hear, it did not matter. Groups under pressure obey their own physics, and the pressure was coming. When the truck stopped, the county had 9 days of food on its shelves, and no sheriff patrols passed the town line. Gas stations went cash only, then barter only, then empty. Dale watched both camps change in the same week, in the same way, like 2 clocks keeping the same wrong time. The compound sent men into town in pairs, armed, polite, escorting they called it. The collective posted sentries on their gate, community safety they called it, same instinct, different vocabulary. Political scientists who study failing states call it the security dilemma. Every step one group takes to feel safer makes the other group feel less safe. Nobody has to be evil. The ladder builds itself. Day 4, the compound bought out the hardware store's ammunition with silver coins. The collective voted to move the seed vault underground. Each side heard about the other before sundown. In a dying county, rumor is the last utility still running. Dale fixed the compound's generator on Tuesday and the collective's irrigation pump on Thursday. He charged both the same: food, fuel, and being left alone. The compound offered him a patch and a rank. The collective offered him a vote and a bunk. He thanked both, finished the job, and went home before dark, twice. Understand what Dale understood. Joining feels safe. It is the single most dangerous decision of a collapse. A group's enemies become your enemies the moment you put on the jacket, and you do not get a vote on who they pick. Week 2, the moderates started leaving both camps. The compound's best mechanic packed his family north. The collective's only nurse followed 2 days later. Scarcity does not radicalize groups, it drains the people who kept them sane. What stays behind when the reasonable people leave has a name in the research: the hardliner ratchet. Every group meeting is angrier than the last, because the ones who would have said calm down are gone. The compound started calling the river people locusts. The collective started calling the ridge people warlords. Naming is aiming. Once a group has a word for you that is not your name, you have become a category. Categories are easier to hurt. Day 11, the first requisition. 4 men from the ridge walked into Hanson's dairy and left with his diesel, against a handwritten receipt promising payment after the emergency. The emergency, everyone understood, had no end date. The collective condemned the theft at a general assembly. Then their food committee voted to collectivize the orchards on the South Bank. For the duration, nobody on the South Bank had been asked. From the middle, Dale watched the valley learn the oldest lesson of collapse. An armed group that feeds itself from its neighbors is a tax office. The only question is the rate and whether they still say please. He made his own moves that week, all of them boring. boring is the discipline. He buried a second cache of food and fuel at the tree line. He walked 2 exit routes until he could do them in the dark. He stripped his fence line of anything worth wanting. The good trailer went behind the barn. The generator got a plywood shed and a muffler. Wealth you can see is an invitation you cannot take back. And he kept trading with both camps, fairly publicly and small, useful enough to protect, never valuable enough to own. That ratio is the whole art of surviving between armed neighbors. Day 14, the bridge, 1 lane of rusted iron, the only crossing for 9 miles, and the compound put 2 men and a gate on it. Tolls, they said, for maintenance. The river ran between the collective and its winter pasture. The bridge was their lifeline. The compound knew that. That was the point. Choke points are how small groups make big claims. The collective answered with arithmetic. The compound's water line ran off the river intake through collective land up the ridge. Day 15, the flow dropped to a trickle. Maintenance, they said. Here is the escalation ladder, and mark how ordinary every rung feels while you are on it. A patrol, a gate, a toll, a tax, a valve. By the time anyone says the word war out loud, the valley had been fighting one for a week with paperwork and plumbing. Dale crossed the bridge that week with a smile, a toolbox, and the toll, 1 jar of honey. He fixed the gate's hinge without being asked. On the way back, he waved at the collective sentry by name. Both sides thought he was theirs, neither said it out loud. That ambiguity was his armor, and he polished it every single day. If you remember one rule from this story, make it his. Have one skill everyone needs, one story nobody doubts, and no flag anywhere on your body, your truck, or your gate. Day 16, the rumor. A collective forager did not come home. By morning, the story on the river was that the ridge had taken her. By noon, the story on the ridge was that she had been sent to poison the well. Nobody had checked the urgent care in the next county. In a collapse, a rumor is not information. It is ammunition being distributed. The groups that survive appoint one job before any other, the person who checks. Nobody in the valley had that job. Dale drove 40 miles on hoarded gas, found the forager sedated and safe with a broken ankle, and drove back with a note in her handwriting. He was 9 hours too late. Because at dusk on day 16, somebody on the ridge shot the collective's livestock guard dog at the pasture gate, and somebody by the river put a rifle round through the compound's water tank. History does not record which came first. It never does. Grief plus rumor plus rifles is a chemical reaction. The moderates were gone. The checkers never existed. The only thing standing between the valley and day 19 was 72 hours and 1 welder. Dale did not mediate, remember that. Mediators pick the middle, and in a 2-camp war, the middle is the only position both sides can shoot without apologizing to anyone. Instead, he did what gray men do. He moved people, not positions. The compound's youngest family had a sick infant and doubts. The collective's oldest couple had a bad well and second thoughts. Dale's truck, after dark, no questions. His barn that week held 11 people who officially did not exist. Too soft for the ridge, too tired for the river, too scared to stay in town. The valley's third faction, the one that never gets a flag. Feeding them cost him both caches, worth it and not for the reasons you think. Every person in that barn had a brother, a daughter, a friend inside one of the camps. Information walked in with them, and so did restraint. That is the part the war games miss. Armed groups are not machines, they are somebody's cousins. The barn was quietly relearning the valley that fact, one bowl at a time. Day 18, the compound issued an ultimatum about the water line. The collective issued one about the bridge. Both gave the other until noon tomorrow. Ultimatums are how groups tell themselves the other side chose this. That night, Dale made his only political move of the whole collapse. He drained the fuel from his own truck, split it into 2 cans, and delivered one to each camp with the same sentence: "You will want this for the generators after." After, he let the word do the work. It was the first time in 18 days anyone had made either camp picture the day after the shooting. It did not stop day 19. Nothing was going to stop day 19. At dawn, a rifle on the ridge and a rifle by the river disagreed about a story neither had checked, and the bridge's wooden deck caught fire in the exchange. 40 on each side, like the beginning of the story. Here is what the movies get wrong. Almost nobody aimed. Research on infantry fire says most humans point a weapon at a category and pray they miss the cousin inside it. It lasted 11 minutes, 2 dead, 1 from each camp because the ledger of these things is always balanced. A 19-year-old who had joined the ridge for 3 meals a day, a schoolteacher who had joined the river to matter. The fire took the bridge, the river took the ashes, and the valley woke up on day 20 owning 1, crossing fewer and 2 graves more, with winter 6 weeks out. This is the worst case, so look at it, not armies, not battles. A burned bridge, a poisoned water line, 2 funerals with overlapping guest lists, and 100 people who can no longer buy, borrow, or beg from the other half of their own valley. Civil conflict is not an event, it is a subtraction. Every day it runs, the valley has less, fewer hands, fewer trades, fewer people who remember why the feud started, and more who only remember the graves. The compound lasted until February, not defeated, dissolved. Guard shifts in the cold, rations shrinking, and the young men drifting home to mothers in town. Fortresses do not starve loudly, they evaporate. The collective made it to spring, then split in a meeting that lasted 9 hours over a question that had nothing to do with the ridge. Communities that organize around an enemy lose their glue the day the enemy leaves. And the barn people, they went home, all 11, to houses that had not been burned in a town that still knew their names, carrying the only currency that survived the winter, being owed favors by everyone and blood by no one. The valley counted its year that spring, 2 dead in 11 minutes of shooting, 6 dead of cold, untreated infection, and a bridge that was no longer there when the ambulance question came up. The gunfight was the headline, the subtraction was the massacre. So now the lessons from the one man who slept in his own bed all winter. 1. When groups form, the exits are cheap and the memberships are expensive. Every patch, flag, slogan, and forwarded rumor is a down payment on somebody else's war. Stay plain, stay yours. 2. Be the man both sides need on a Tuesday. Fix, heal, haul, bake, listen. In every collapse on record, the specialists outlive the soldiers. 3. Check the story. Every feud in history has a first stone nobody actually saw thrown. If your group has no designated checker, you are not a community. You are a crowd with a fuse. 4. Feed the third faction, the scared, the soft, the leavers. They are not weakness walking away. They are the valley's memory of being neighbors, and whoever shelters them inherits the peace. 5. Watch the ladder, not the shouting. Patrols, gates, tolls, taxes, valves. When you see the second rung in your county, your preparations should already be boring, buried, and finished. The bridge got rebuilt 3 summers later, but the valley that crossed it was smaller. The moderates who left in week 2 never came back. 2 families tend 2 graves on opposite banks and still do not speak. Every gate stands open now, and nobody flies a flag because there are fewer people left to raise one. 40% of Americans now tell pollsters a civil conflict is likely within a decade. Maybe they are wrong, but the ladder does not care what you believe. It only asks whether you will recognize the first rung in your county on a boring Tuesday. The valley is invented. The pollster's number and the ladder it warns about are not. And when it appears, remember the welder's arithmetic. No flag, 1 skill, 2 exits, every favor banked, because the question was never which side wins. It was who is still standing when both sides are gone. Dale was still standing. He got exactly what he wanted, and he stood in it alone on a hollowed-out hillside, and he never once decided it had been worth the price the valley paid to teach him.